The morning sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as General Raymond Turner adjusted his tie. At 57, he carried himself with the quiet dignity earned through 3 decades of military service. Today, however, he wasn't in uniform. Dressed in a simple navy blazer and khaki pants, he looked like any other citizen arriving for jury duty. The Jefferson County Courthouse was already busy despite the early hour. People shuffled through the main entrance, their faces showing varying degrees of annoyance at having been summoned for civic duty. Turner checked his watch, 7:45 a.m. He was 15 minutes early, just as he had been for every appointment in his adult life. Military habits die hard, he thought to himself with a slight smile. As he approached the security checkpoint, Turner noticed the line moving smoothly. 3 officers manned the station, efficiently guiding people through the metal detectors. An older white woman passed through with barely a glance from the officers. A young white man in a business suit followed, nodding politely as he collected his belongings from the plastic bin. When Turner stepped up to place his keys, wallet and phone in the tray, something in the atmosphere shifted. Officer Peter Daniels, a stocky man with close-cropped hair and 20 years on the force according to his badge, looked up from his position behind the scanner. His eyes narrowed slightly as they settled on Turner. "ID," Daniels said flatly, extending his hand. The word carried none of the professional courtesy he'd shown to previous visitors. Turner handed over his driver's license. "Good morning," he said pleasantly. Daniels didn't respond to the greeting. He studied the license with exaggerated care, looking from the photo to Turner's face repeatedly. "Oakwood Hills," Daniels read aloud, referring to Turner's address in one of the city's more affluent neighborhoods. "That's quite the fancy address." His tone suggested disbelief. "Yes, I've lived there for about 8 years now," Turner replied evenly. 8 years in Oakwood Hills," Daniels repeated, drawing out each word. "Must be nice." A slight crease appeared between Turner's eyebrows, but his expression remained neutral. Behind him, other courthouse visitors shifted uncomfortably, sensing the unnecessary tension. "Step through," Daniels finally said, handing back the license with 2 fingers, as if reluctant to make contact with Turner's hand. Turner walked through the metal detector without incident. The machine remained silent. "Stop right there," Daniels called out sharply. "Need to do a secondary check." The 2 other security officers exchanged quick glances. One of them, a younger Hispanic officer named Rodriguez according to his nameplate, looked particularly uncomfortable but remained silent. "Arms out to the side," Daniels instructed, reaching for his handheld metal detector wand. Turner complied without comment, though he noticed that no one else that morning had received this additional screening. As Daniels ran the wand over his body with deliberate slowness, Turner maintained his composure, his face betraying nothing of his thoughts. "What brings you to court today?" Daniels asked, though he must have seen the jury summons Turner had placed in the tray with his other belongings. "Jury duty," Turner answered simply. "Jury duty," Daniels echoed with a smirk. "Well, ain't that something? You think you're qualified to judge other folks?" The question hung in the air, its implication clear to everyone within earshot. A court clerk passing by slowed her steps, frowning at Daniels' tone. "I'm just doing my civic duty, officer," Turner replied, his voice calm but firm. Daniels finished his unnecessary inspection and stepped back. "You can go on now, boy," he said, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. The word landed like a slap. Several people in line inhaled sharply. Rodriguez, the younger officer, stared at the floor, his discomfort now plainly visible. The court clerk who had paused nearby looked horrified. For a brief moment, something flashed in Turner's eyes, a glimpse of the steel that had carried him through battlefield commands and Pentagon politics. Then it was gone, replaced by the same composed expression he'd maintained throughout the encounter. Turner collected his belongings with unhurried movements. He could feel the weight of stares, some sympathetic, others simply curious to see how he would react. He'd experienced moments like this before, though less frequently as he'd risen through the ranks. The familiar calculations ran through his mind. Confront or let it pass? Make a scene or move on? "Thank you, officers," Turner said politely, nodding to all 3 men before walking away. Rodriguez gave him an apologetic glance that his superior didn't see. As Turner made his way toward the jury assembly room, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from his wife, Vivian. "Good luck with jury duty today. Love you." He smiled at the message, his first genuine smile since entering the courthouse. After 30 years of marriage, Vivian still knew how to brighten his day with just a few words. He typed back a quick response, saying nothing about the incident at security. The jury assembly room was a large utilitarian space with rows of uncomfortable-looking chairs. About 50 people were already seated, flipping through magazines or scrolling on their phones. Turner found a seat near the back and settled in, taking a moment to observe his surroundings. A young woman at the front was calling out names and checking people in. When Turner approached her desk, she smiled professionally. "Good morning, sir. Your name, please?" "Raymond Turner," he replied. She ran her finger down a list. "Yes, here you are. If you could just sign next to your name and take a seat. The orientation video will begin in about 20 minutes. As Turner signed his name, he noticed Officer Daniels had entered the room and was speaking with another security officer near the door. Daniels' eyes tracked him as he returned to his seat. An older man sitting nearby leaned over. "First time on jury duty?" he asked Turner in a friendly voice. "Yes, actually," Turner replied. "I've been exempt most of my adult life due to my job." "Oh? What line of work are you in?" the man asked. Before Turner could answer, a court administrator entered the room and called for everyone's attention. The orientation was about to begin. Turner settled back in his chair, relieved for the interruption. He preferred not to discuss his military rank in casual conversation. It often changed how people treated him. The administrator, a brisk woman in her 40s, welcomed them to jury service and explained the process. As she spoke, Turner noticed Daniels lingering by the door, his gaze repeatedly drifting toward where Turner sat. "Once orientation is complete," the administrator was saying, "you'll be divided into groups and assigned to different courtrooms. Some of you may be selected for a trial today, others may be asked to return tomorrow, and some may be excused entirely." As she continued explaining the selection process, Turner found his thoughts drifting to the incident at the security checkpoint. In his 30 years of military service, he had developed a thick skin against prejudice, but that didn't make such encounters any less troubling. What bothered him most wasn't the personal disrespect, but the casual confidence with which Daniels had displayed his bias, as if he expected no consequences. Turner thought about the younger officer, Rodriguez, who had clearly recognized the wrongness of the situation but remained silent. How many times had that scene played out? How many others had endured similar treatment or worse? The orientation video began playing, a dated production featuring earnest actors explaining the importance of jury duty in the American justice system. Turner watched without really seeing it, his mind still working through the morning's events. By the time the video ended, Turner had made a decision. He wouldn't let the incident pass unaddressed, but neither would he allow it to become a personal vendetta. There were proper channels, proper procedures. If Officer Daniels had treated him this way, he had almost certainly done the same to others who might not have been in a position to speak up. The court administrator returned to the front of the room. "We'll now begin calling names for the first panel. When you hear your name, please line up by the door and the bailiff will escort you to courtroom 3. She began reading from a clipboard. After the 10th name, she called out, "Raymond Turner." Turner rose from his seat and joined the line forming near the door. As he passed by Officer Daniels, their eyes met briefly. Daniels' expression was a mixture of disdain and something else, perhaps surprised that Turner hadn't reacted more strongly to his provocation. Turner simply nodded politely and continued on his way. He had faced down enemy fire in combat zones. An officer with a prejudice problem wasn't going to rattle him. But as the group was led toward the courtroom, Turner pulled out his phone and quickly added a reminder to his calendar. Call Thomas, 12:30 p.m. Thomas Wilson had been his roommate at West Point over 35 years ago. Now he was the state attorney general. They still played golf together once a month. Turner put his phone away and straightened his shoulders, ready to fulfill his civic duty. The morning's unpleasantness would be addressed, but first, he had a jury selection to attend. The bailiff led Turner and the other potential jurors into courtroom 3, a wood-paneled room that smelled faintly of furniture polish and old books. The American flag stood proudly next to the judge's bench, which remained empty for now. The prosecutor and defense attorney were already seated at their respective tables, shuffling through papers and occasionally whispering to their assistants. Please take a seat in the jury box, the bailiff instructed. When the judge enters, please rise. Turner settled into one of the uncomfortable wooden chairs in the jury box. He glanced around the courtroom, taking in the details with a practiced eye. Years of military briefings had taught him to quickly assess new environments. He noticed Officer Daniels had followed them into the courtroom and now stood by the door, arms crossed over his chest. Their eyes met briefly before Turner looked away. The courtroom doors opened again and a clerk entered. All rise for the Honorable Judge Eleanor Rivera, she announced. Everyone stood as Judge Rivera. A woman in her 60s with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose took her place at the bench. She nodded to the room before sitting down. You may be seated, she said, her voice clear and authoritative. Good morning, everyone. We're here today for jury selection in the case of State versus Harding. Before we begin, I want to thank you all for fulfilling your civic duty. Our justice system cannot function without citizens like yourselves. She proceeded to explain the case, a burglary charge, and the jury selection process. As she spoke, Turner noticed Officer Daniels shifting positions by the door, his eyes repeatedly drifting toward the jury box with a look of barely concealed contempt. We'll now begin with preliminary questions, Judge Rivera said. When your name is called, please stand and answer the questions displayed on the screen. The first few potential jurors introduced themselves: a teacher, a retired plumber, a college student, a nurse. Each gave brief answers about their occupations, whether they knew anyone in law enforcement, and if they had ever been victims of a crime. Raymond Turner, the clerk called out. Turner stood, straightening his blazer. Good morning, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Turner, Judge Rivera replied. Please tell us about yourself. I'm General Raymond Turner, United States Army, he stated simply. I've served for 30 years, currently stationed at the Pentagon as Deputy Chief of Operations. A ripple of surprise moved through the courtroom. Judge Rivera's eyebrows rose slightly. Thank you for your service, General Turner, she said with genuine respect in her voice. From his position by the door, Officer Daniels shifted uncomfortably. His posture had changed, no longer relaxed and superior, but suddenly tense. The judge continued with her questions. Do you know anyone in law enforcement, General Turner? Yes, Your Honor. Through my military career, I've worked with various law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, local police departments, and military police. And have you ever been the victim of a crime? No, Your Honor, I have not. The questioning continued down the line of potential jurors. Turner sat back down, aware of the changed atmosphere in the room. Several people were now looking at him with newfound interest or respect. The prosecutor had made a note on his legal pad and was studying Turner thoughtfully. When the judge called for a 15-minute recess before the next phase of jury selection, Turner rose with the others. As they filed out of the courtroom, he could feel Officer Daniels's gaze following him. In the hallway, Turner checked his watch. It was nearly 11:30 a.m., still an hour before he planned to make his phone call. He decided to find the cafeteria for a cup of coffee. As he walked down the corridor, he heard footsteps behind him. Hey, you, a voice called out. Turner recognized it immediately. Officer Daniels. Turner turned calmly. Yes, officer? Daniels approached, his face set in a skeptical frown. General, huh? He said, his tone making the title sound like a joke. That's quite a claim. A few bystanders slowed their pace, watching the interaction with curious eyes. Among them was Rodriguez, the younger officer from the security checkpoint who had just turned the corner with a clipboard in hand. It's not a claim, Officer Daniels, Turner replied evenly. It's my rank. Right, Daniels said with a snort. And I'm the president. Listen, I've been working security in this courthouse for 15 years. I've seen all types trying to get special treatment. Turner regarded him steadily. I'm not looking for special treatment. I'm here to serve on a jury, just like everyone else. Sure you are, Daniels said, stepping closer. Though he was shorter than Turner by a few inches, he puffed out his chest in an attempt to be intimidating. So where's your uniform, General? The last word dripped with sarcasm. Citizens don't wear uniforms to jury duty, Officer Daniels, Turner replied, his voice remaining calm despite the provocation. Military personnel are citizens first. By now, a small crowd had gathered, keeping a respectful distance but clearly interested in the confrontation. Rodriguez had moved closer, his discomfort evident. You got some ID to back up this general business? Daniels demanded, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Because I'm thinking you're just some guy who likes to play dress-up. A woman in the crowd gasped softly at the blatant disrespect. Rodriguez took a half-step forward, then stopped, conflict visible on his face. Turner's expression remained unchanged, but something hardened in his eyes. "Officer Daniels," he said quietly, "I have served this country faithfully for 3 decades. I've led men and women into combat, and I've buried too many of them. I don't need to prove myself to you." Daniels' face flushed. "Well, I think you do," he insisted, his voice rising. "I think you're full of—" "That's enough, Officer Daniels," a new voice cut in. It was the court clerk who had witnessed the earlier incident at the security checkpoint. She stepped forward, clipboard clutched tightly to her chest. "The judge is asking for you." Daniels hesitated, clearly reluctant to back down but aware he was creating a scene. "This isn't over," he muttered to Turner before turning away. As Daniels stalked off, the small crowd began to disperse. Rodriguez lingered, looking like he wanted to say something but ultimately followed his superior down the hall. The court clerk approached Turner. "I'm sorry about that, sir," she said quietly. "That was completely inappropriate." Turner nodded. "Thank you for stepping in, Ms. Chen. Linda Chen," she supplied. "I'm Judge Rivera's clerk." "Thank you, Miss Chen. I appreciate your intervention." She glanced in the direction Daniels had gone, then lowered her voice. "He's like that with a lot of people, especially—" She trailed off, but her meaning was clear. "I understand," Turner said. "How long has this been going on?" Ms. Chen sighed. "Years. There have been complaints, but nothing ever seems to happen." She looked up at Turner, a hint of hope in her eyes. "Maybe someone will finally listen now." Turner checked his watch again. "Perhaps," he said thoughtfully. "If you'll excuse me, Miss Chen, I need to make a phone call." "Of course, General," she replied with a small, respectful nod. "The cafeteria is down that hallway if you're looking for a quiet spot." Turner thanked her and made his way to the cafeteria, which was nearly empty this early in the day. He found a table in the corner, away from the few scattered occupants, and took out his phone. It was still before his scheduled reminder, but the second confrontation with Daniels had changed his timeline. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the one he needed. Thomas Wilson, State Attorney General. They had known each other since their first day at West Point, fresh-faced cadets with dreams of serving their country. Through deployments, promotions, marriages, children, and losses, their friendship had remained a constant. Turner's thumb hovered over the call button. He wasn't one to pull rank or use connections for personal matters. But this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every person who had faced Daniels' prejudice without the power to challenge it. It was about Rodriguez, trapped between his conscience and his job. It was about Ms. Chen, who had witnessed this behavior for years without seeing any change. He pressed the call button and raised the phone to his ear. After 2 rings, a familiar voice answered. "Ray, this is a surprise. Aren't you supposed to be on jury duty today?" "I am," Turner replied. "And that's actually why I'm calling, Tom. I need to talk to you about something happening at the Jefferson County Courthouse." "You sound serious," Thomas said, his tone changing immediately. "What's going on?" "It's a bit complicated," Turner said, watching as more people began to filter into the cafeteria as the lunch hour approached. "But it involves a courthouse security officer who's been using his position to harass and intimidate citizens, particularly people of color." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Then Thomas spoke, his voice now carrying the weight of his office. "Tell me everything, Ray. Don't leave anything out." As Turner began to explain the morning's events, he noticed Rodriguez enter the cafeteria, alone this time. Their eyes met across the room, and the young officer gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod before quickly looking away. Turner continued his conversation, describing both encounters with Daniels in detail. As he spoke, he could hear Thomas typing notes in the background. "I'm not looking to cause a scene, Tom," Turner concluded, "but this isn't right, and from what I've gathered, it's not an isolated incident." "You did the right thing by calling me," Thomas assured him. "This kind of behavior has no place in our justice system. Give me 20 minutes, Ray, I'll make some calls." As Turner ended the call, he felt no satisfaction, only a quiet resolve. The wheels had been set in motion. Now it was time to return to the courtroom and continue with his civic duty, exactly as he had intended to do from the beginning. Turner returned to the courtroom just as the 15-minute recess was ending. The other potential jurors were filing back to their seats, their conversations hushed as Judge Rivera took her place at the bench once more. Turner noticed that Officer Daniels was no longer stationed by the door. Instead, another officer, one he hadn't seen before, stood at attention in his place. "We will now continue with the jury selection process," Judge Rivera announced. "Counsel will ask questions to determine if there are any reasons why a particular juror should not serve on this case." The prosecutor stood first, a tall woman with short gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Good afternoon," she began. "My name is Catherine Powell, and I represent the state in this matter. I have a few questions I'd like to ask the potential jurors." She proceeded to ask about their views on law enforcement, whether they believed property crime should be punished severely, and if they could remain impartial despite hearing about the defendant's prior record. When it was Turner's turn to answer, he gave thoughtful, measured responses. He explained that while he respected law enforcement, he also believed in the presumption of innocence and the need for evidence beyond reasonable doubt. Ms. Powell nodded, seemingly satisfied with his answers. The defense attorney, a younger man with wire-rimmed glasses and a slightly rumpled suit, followed with his own questions. He focused on potential biases against his client, who sat quietly at the defense table, a thin, nervous-looking man in his 30s. "General Turner," the defense attorney said, "given your military background, do you think you might be more inclined to side with authority figures like police officers in this case?" Turner considered the question carefully. "No, I don't believe so," he replied. "In fact, my military experience has taught me the importance of following proper procedures and the dangers of unchecked authority. I would evaluate the evidence presented without bias." The defense attorney looked surprised but pleased. He moved on to the next potential juror. As the questioning continued, Turner felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. He didn't check it, knowing it would be inappropriate during court proceedings, but he suspected it might be Thomas getting back to him sooner than expected. The jury selection process stretched on for another hour. Finally, Judge Rivera addressed the group. "The following individuals have been selected to serve on this jury," she announced, before reading out a list of names. "Raymond Turner," she called, among others. Turner wasn't surprised. His background made him an attractive juror to both sides, his military service suggesting he would be tough on crime while his leadership experience indicated he would be fair and thoughtful. Those whose names were called, "Please remain seated. The rest are excused with our thanks," Judge Rivera continued. "We'll take a 1-hour lunch break before beginning the trial. Jury members, please report to the jury room by 1:30 p.m. As people began to move around the courtroom, Turner finally checked his phone. There was indeed a text message from Thomas. "Things in motion. Chief Judge Howard and Police Commissioner Bennett both notified. Stay in touch." Turner put his phone away, feeling neither triumph nor anxiety, just the calm certainty that proper channels were being followed. He made his way to the jury room, where a court officer informed them they could go to the cafeteria for lunch but should not discuss the case with anyone. The cafeteria was crowded now, filled with courthouse employees, lawyers, and citizens with business before the court. Turner got in line for food, selecting a simple sandwich and coffee. As he paid, he noticed Rodriguez, the young officer from earlier, hovering nearby with his own lunch tray, looking uncertain. When Turner found a relatively quiet table in the corner, Rodriguez approached cautiously. "General Turner, may I join you, sir?" Turner gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Please do, Officer Rodriguez." The young man sat down, placing his tray carefully on the table. He glanced around nervously before speaking in a low voice. "I wanted to apologize for this morning, sir, for not saying anything when Officer Daniels—" He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "You were in a difficult position," Turner acknowledged, keeping his voice equally low. "Standing up to a superior officer isn't easy, especially in public." Rodriguez nodded gratefully at the understanding but still looked troubled. "It's not just today, sir. It's been happening for years. Not just to you, to lots of people. Has anyone reported it?" Turner asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Many times," Rodriguez confirmed with a sigh. But Daniels has friends in the department. The complaints get filed and forgotten. Some people tried to record him once, but phones aren't allowed at the security checkpoint, so he shrugged helplessly. Turner took a sip of his coffee, considering this information. How long have you worked with Officer Daniels? Almost 2 years, Rodriguez replied. It's my first job out of the academy. I wanted to work in the courts because I thought it would be, I don't know, more about justice, I guess. He gave a bitter laugh. Sounds naive now. Not at all, Turner said. It's why most of us enter public service, whether it's law enforcement or the military. We want to be part of something meaningful, something that matters. Rodriguez looked up, meeting Turner's eyes directly for the first time. Can I ask you something, sir? How did you handle it? Throughout your career, I mean. When people... Again, he didn't finish the sentence. Turner considered the question carefully. It wasn't always easy, he admitted. When I was younger, I sometimes reacted with anger, which rarely helped. Over time, I learned to pick my battles and use proper channels when possible. He paused. But I never stopped fighting for what was right, just changed how I fought. And did things actually change? Rodriguez asked, hope and skepticism warring in his voice. Sometimes, Turner said honestly, not always as quickly or completely as I would have liked. But yes, things changed. They're still changing. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the cafeteria entrance. A man in a suit that practically screamed official business had entered, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers who weren't part of the regular courthouse security. People turned to stare as they made their way across the room. Rodriguez tensed. That's Captain Rivera, he whispered. Head of Internal Affairs. And those officers are from his team, not our precinct. The trio stopped at a table where Officer Daniels sat with 2 other courthouse security officers. Words were exchanged, too distant to hear, but Daniels' face shifted from confusion to anger to something close to fear. After a brief but intense conversation, Daniels stood and was escorted from the cafeteria, the eyes of everyone in the room following his exit. Rodriguez turned back to Turner, his expression a mixture of shock and tentative hope. What did you do, sir? I made a phone call, Turner said simply, to someone who could ensure the situation was properly investigated. Just like that? Rodriguez asked, snapping his fingers softly. Justice shouldn't require connections, Turner acknowledged, but sometimes you need to use the tools you have to fix what's broken. A thoughtful silence fell between them. Finally, Rodriguez spoke again. There's something you should know, sir. There's a security camera in the hallway where Daniels confronted you the second time, and another at the checkpoint from this morning. The footage gets saved for 30 days. Turner nodded, understanding the significance. That could be helpful for the investigation. I think it will be, Rodriguez agreed. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he added, I'm going to file my own report about what I've witnessed. It's time. That takes courage, Turner said, genuine respect in his voice. It's not easy to stand up, especially when you've been silent before. Rodriguez straightened slightly in his chair. You asked if things actually change, sir. I guess they only do if we help change them. Turner smiled, recognizing his own words from countless leadership seminars reflected back at him. Before he could respond, his phone vibrated again. Another message from Thomas, a video footage being reviewed, statements being taken. Commissioner wants to speak with you when you're available. I should get back to the jury room, Turner said, checking the time. But thank you for the conversation, Officer Rodriguez. No, sir. Thank you, Rodriguez replied with newfound conviction in his voice. As Turner walked back toward the jury room, he passed Ms. Chen in the hallway. She gave him a small, knowing smile and a nod that conveyed both gratitude and respect. Word traveled fast in courthouses, it seemed. Back in the jury room, the other selected jurors were gathering, making polite small talk as they waited for the trial to begin. Turner took a seat near the window, gazing out at the city he had served from afar for most of his career. Now, unexpectedly, he had found another way to serve justice. Not on a distant battlefield or in a Pentagon office, but here in his own community. A court officer entered the room. Ladies and gentlemen, Judge Rivera asks if General Turner could step out for a moment. There's a matter that requires his attention. Turner rose, straightening his blazer out of habit. The other jurors looked on with curiosity as he followed the officer out of the room. In the hallway stood Judge Rivera, alongside an older man with silver hair and a stern expression whom Turner recognized from news reports as Chief Judge Howard. the administrative head of the county court system. General Turner, Judge Howard said, extending his hand, I believe we need to have a conversation about the events of this morning. And unfortunately, I'll need to excuse you from jury duty today. I understand. Your Honor, Turner replied, shaking the offered hand. We have a lot to discuss, Judge Howard continued, his expression serious but respectful, and I believe Police Commissioner Bennett is on his way as well. Judge Rivera added quietly, It seems your phone call set quite a few wheels in motion. General, Turner nodded, feeling no satisfaction in Daniel's trouble, only a quiet hope that perhaps this time something would actually change. The path to justice was rarely straight or simple, but today it felt like a step had been taken in the right direction. Chief Judge Howard led Turner to a private conference room on the top floor of the courthouse. The space was elegant but functional, with a polished oak table and high-backed leather chairs. Large windows offered a view of the city skyline, a stark contrast to the windowless jury room Turner had just left. Please have a seat, General, Judge Howard said, gesturing to one of the chairs. Can I offer you anything? Water, coffee? Water would be fine, thank you, Turner replied, settling into a chair. Despite the unexpected turn of events, he maintained his calm demeanor. Judge Howard poured water from a pitcher on a side table and handed a glass to Turner. Just as he took a seat himself, there was a knock at the door. That must be Commissioner Bennett, Judge Howard said, rising to open the door. Police Commissioner Bennett was a broad-shouldered man with a military-style crew cut and a serious expression. He entered the room with purposeful strides, followed by a woman in a business suit carrying a laptop. General Turner, the commissioner said, extending his hand. Frank Bennett, I apologize for meeting under these circumstances. Commissioner, Turner acknowledged, shaking his hand firmly. This is Diane Taylor, head of our Professional Standards Division, Bennett added, gesturing to the woman who nodded respectfully to Turner. Once they were all seated, Judge Howard cleared his throat. General Turner, I want to personally apologize for the treatment you received in my courthouse today. It's completely unacceptable and does not reflect the values of our justice system. Turner nodded in acknowledgement but didn't speak. Years of high-level military briefings had taught him the value of listening before responding. We've reviewed the security footage from this morning, Commissioner Bennett continued, his expression grim. Ms. Taylor, would you show the General what we found? Taylor opened her laptop and turned it so Turner could see the screen. She played a video that showed Turner's arrival at the security checkpoint that morning, capturing the entire interaction with Officer Daniels. The audio was surprisingly clear, including Daniels' condescending tone and the boy comment that had drawn gasps from bystanders. She then played a second clip, showing the confrontation in the hallway after the recess, where Daniels had openly mocked Turner's military rank. We've also received statements from several witnesses, Taylor explained, including Officer Rodriguez and Ms. Chen, the court clerk. Both confirmed this pattern of behavior from Officer Daniels. And it's not the first time, Commissioner Bennett added, his jaw tight with controlled anger. We've discovered previous complaints against Officer Daniels that were, he hesitated, choosing his words carefully, not properly investigated. Judge Howard shifted uncomfortably in his chair. It appears that Officer Daniels' immediate supervisor was dismissing or burying the complaints before they reached the appropriate channels. We're looking into that as well. Turner took a sip of water, processing this information. What happens now? He asked. Officer Daniels has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation, Commissioner Bennett explained. Based on what we've already seen, I don't expect him to return to courthouse duty, but we need to follow proper procedures. Of course, Turner agreed. Proper procedures were important even, perhaps especially when dealing with someone who had abused their authority. We would like to include your statement in our report, if you're willing, Taylor said. Your perspective would be valuable, particularly given your position and experience. Turner considered this request. I'm happy to provide a statement, he said. But I want to be clear about something. I don't want special treatment because of my rank. What happened to me today happens to citizens without my advantages every day. Judge Howard and Commissioner Bennett exchanged glances. That's precisely why your statement is so important, Judge Howard said. It adds weight to the other complaints and helps establish a pattern of behavior. And unfortunately, Commissioner Bennett added with a heavy sigh, the reality is that complaints from someone of your stature do tend to be taken more seriously. It's not right, but it's the truth. Turner nodded, understanding all too well. In that case, I'll do whatever I can to help. Not just regarding Officer Daniels, but the system that allowed his behavior to continue unchecked for so long. The door opened, and a court officer appeared. Excuse me, Your Honor. State Attorney General Wilson has arrived. Send him in, Judge Howard replied. Thomas Wilson entered the room with the confidence of someone used to commanding attention. Despite his formal suit and tie, there was something approachable about him, perhaps the hint of a smile that never quite left his eyes. He spotted Turner and his face broke into a warm grin. Ray, he said, clasping Turner's hand warmly, trust you to turn jury duty into a major investigation. I was just following the chain of command. Tom, Turner replied with a small smile. Thomas turned to greet Judge Howard and Commissioner Bennett, then took a seat next to Turner. I've been briefed on the situation, Thomas said, his expression turning serious, and I've instructed my office to review all complaints filed against courthouse security personnel over the past 5 years. This isn't just about one officer. Commissioner Bennett nodded in agreement. We're conducting our own internal review as well. The officer who was burying the complaints has also been placed on administrative leave. Good, Thomas said firmly. But I think we need to go further. This is an opportunity to implement systemic changes. What did you have in mind? Judge Howard asked. For starters, an independent review board for complaints against courthouse personnel, Thomas suggested. One that includes civilian representatives as well as law enforcement. And mandatory bias training for all courthouse security officers. That would require additional funding, Judge Howard pointed out, though he didn't sound opposed to the idea. I believe I can help with that, Thomas replied. My office has discretionary funds for justice system improvements. This certainly qualifies. As the officials continued discussing potential reforms, Turner found himself thinking about Rodriguez, the young officer who had finally found the courage to speak up, and about Ms. Chen, who had intervened when she saw injustice occurring. There were good people within the system who wanted change. General Turner, Commissioner Bennett's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Would you be willing to assist us in another way? We're planning to revamp our training programs for security personnel. Your experience with leadership training in the military could be invaluable. Turner hadn't expected this request. In what capacity? He asked. As a consultant initially, Bennett explained, to help us develop a comprehensive program addressing bias, proper use of authority, and professional conduct. If it goes well, perhaps something more permanent. Turner thought about his current Pentagon position. It was prestigious, certainly, but much of his work involved pushing papers and attending meetings. This was an opportunity to make a direct, tangible difference in his own community. I'd be interested in discussing it further, he said carefully. Thomas smiled, clearly pleased. I think it's an excellent idea. Ray has been training leaders for decades, and his unique perspective would be particularly valuable in this context. The meeting continued for another hour as they discussed details of the investigation and potential reforms. Taylor took Turner's official statement, recording his account of both encounters with Officer Daniels. Throughout it all, Turner maintained his professional demeanor, focusing on the facts rather than emotions. As the meeting wrapped up, Judge Howard extended his hand to Turner once more. Thank you for bringing this matter to our attention, General, and for your willingness to help us address it. I'm just sorry it took something like this to spark action. That's often how change happens, Turner replied. The important thing is what we do with the opportunity. As they prepared to leave the conference room, Thomas held Turner back for a moment. Ray, he said quietly when the others were out of earshot, I know you. You're thinking about Rodriguez and the others who spoke up, aren't you? Turner nodded. They took a risk. I want to make sure they're protected. They will be, Thomas assured him. I'll see to it personally. Whistleblower protections are there for a reason. Turner smiled gratefully at his old friend. Thanks, Tom. Don't mention it, Thomas replied. Now I believe you have a call to make to Vivian. She'll want to hear about all this. Turner chuckled. She certainly will. As they walked out of the conference room, Turner felt a sense of cautious optimism. One phone call hadn't fixed everything. Systemic problems never had simple solutions. but it had been a catalyst for change, and sometimes that was enough to start moving in the right direction. In the main hallway of the courthouse, they passed Rodriguez standing at his post. The young officer straightened as they approached, giving a respectful nod to Turner. "Officer Rodriguez." Turner acknowledged him with a nod of his own. Rodriguez's eyes flickered briefly to Commissioner Bennett, then back to Turner. There was uncertainty in his expression, but determination as well. "Your statement was very helpful," Turner told him quietly as they passed. "Thank you." A flash of relief crossed Rodriguez's face, followed by something that looked like pride. He stood a little taller as they continued down the hallway. Outside the courthouse, Thomas and Turner paused on the steps. "What now?" Thomas asked. "Back to the Pentagon tomorrow?" Turner looked out at the city, his city, and considered the question. "I have some leave saved up," he said thoughtfully. "I think I might stick around for a while. See this through." Thomas clapped him on the shoulder. "I was hoping you'd say that," he said with a smile. "The justice system could use more people like you, Ray. And more people like Rodriguez," Turner added. "The ones who find their courage when it matters most." As they descended the courthouse steps, Turner felt his phone vibrate with a message. It was from Vivian. "How was jury duty? Anything interesting happen?" Turner smiled to himself. She had no idea. 6 months had passed since that fateful day at the courthouse. The early summer heat shimmered above the parking lot as Turner pulled into his reserved space. The sign reading General Raymond Turner, security training consultant, was still new enough to make him smile slightly each time he saw it. He gathered his briefcase and coffee mug, a gift from Vivian that read, "Retired from the Army, not from life," and made his way toward the courthouse entrance. The familiar weight of his military uniform was gone now, replaced by a well-tailored suit that Vivian had insisted he needed for his new civilian role. Turner had officially retired from the Army 3 months ago, after 32 years of service. The Pentagon had been reluctant to lose him, but they'd understood his decision. Some battles were worth fighting closer to home. As he approached the security checkpoint, he was greeted by familiar faces, all wearing new uniforms with body cameras prominently displayed on their chests, one of the many changes implemented in recent months. "Good morning." "General," called Officer Lisa Patel, the newly appointed head of courthouse security. She was a 20-year veteran of the police force who had jumped at the chance to lead the reform department. "Morning, Lisa," Turner replied with a nod. "Everything running smoothly?" "Like clockwork," she said with a smile. "The new recruits from yesterday's training are doing well. Rodriguez has them walking through scenarios on the 2nd floor. Turner nodded approvingly. Officer Rodriguez had been promoted to training officer 3 months ago, part of the sweeping changes that had followed the investigation. His first-hand experience with the previous toxic culture made him particularly effective at teaching new officers what not to do, as Turner made his way through the checkpoint, a process that was now efficient and respectful for all visitors. He reflected on how much had changed. The investigation into Officer Daniels had uncovered a pattern of discrimination that went back years and extended beyond just one man. Several officers had been disciplined or reassigned, and the supervisor who had buried the complaints had been forced to resign. But more importantly, the entire security system had been overhauled. New training programs, transparent complaint procedures, civilian oversight, all implemented with remarkable speed thanks to the combined efforts of Judge Howard, Commissioner Bennett, and Thomas Wilson. Turner's role had grown from consultant to director of the new training initiative. His military experience in leadership development had proven invaluable, but he'd learned just as much from the officers themselves about the unique challenges of courthouse security. As he rode the elevator to the 3rd floor, Turner checked his watch. He had a meeting with Judge Howard in 15 minutes to discuss expanding the training program to other courthouses in the state. The pilot program here had been so successful that other jurisdictions were taking notice. The elevator doors opened, and Turner stepped out, nodding to the court staff he passed in the hallway. Many now greeted him by name, no longer surprised to see him as a regular fixture in the building. He spotted Ms. Chen, now the head court clerk, after Judge Rivera's previous clerk had retired, coming out of a courtroom with an armful of files. "Morning." "General Turner," she called, shifting the files to free one hand for a wave. Need some help with those, Ms. Chen? Turner offered. I've got it, but thank you, she replied with a smile. Don't forget about the Community Oversight Committee meeting this afternoon. The new civilian members are excited to meet you. It's on my calendar, Turner assured her. The Civilian Oversight Committee had been Thomas's idea, a group of community members who reviewed security procedures and complaint data to ensure transparency. It had initially faced resistance from some of the old guard, but the results spoke for themselves. Complaints against security officers had dropped by nearly 70% in the past 6 months. Turner continued to his small but functional office near the administrative section of the courthouse. He had just settled at his desk when there was a knock at the open door. Got a minute, General? Rodriguez asked, leaning against the doorframe. He looked different now, more confident, standing straighter in his new supervisor's uniform. Of course, Turner said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. How are the new recruits doing? Good, Rodriguez said, taking a seat. They're catching on quick. That scenario training you suggested is really effective. Puts them in the shoes of the people coming through security. Turner nodded. Empathy training had been a cornerstone of the new program. Glad to hear it. What's on your mind? Rodriguez hesitated for a moment. I just got word that the final decision came down on Daniels. He's been officially terminated, effective immediately. No pension. Turner took this news without visible reaction. I see. How do you feel about that? Honestly? Rodriguez sighed. I thought I'd feel better about it. Don't get me wrong, he deserved it. But it's not like I'm celebrating, you know? I understand, Turner said quietly. It's never satisfying to see someone lose their career, even when it's deserved. The goal wasn't punishment for its own sake, but accountability and change. Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. And we've definitely got the change part. This place is totally different now. He glanced out the window toward the security checkpoint visible from Turner's office. I actually look forward to coming to work these days. That's the real victory, Turner said with a small smile. Rodriguez stood to leave, then paused. Oh, I almost forgot. There's someone who wants to meet you. A kid, high school student doing a paper on justice system reforms. He heard about what happened here and wanted to interview you. I told him to come by after your meeting with Judge Howard. That's fine, Turner said. Send him in when he arrives. After Rodriguez left, Turner prepared for his meeting, reviewing his notes on the training program expansion. The preliminary data was promising. Not just fewer complaints, but higher satisfaction ratings from both courthouse employees and visitors. His meeting with Judge Howard went well. The judge had become one of his strongest allies in pushing for reforms, leveraging his considerable influence with other judges across the state. The Supreme Court Justice called me yesterday, Judge Howard mentioned as their meeting wrapped up. He's interested in implementing similar reforms statewide. Would you be willing to present at the judicial conference next month? Of course, Turner agreed. The opportunity to expand these changes to every courthouse in the state was exactly what he'd been hoping for. As he returned to his office, Turner found a young man waiting outside his door, presumably the high school student Rodriguez had mentioned. He was maybe 16 or 17 with earnest eyes and a notebook clutched tightly in his hand. General Turner? The young man asked, standing quickly. I'm Anthony Walsh. Officer Rodriguez said I could interview you for my paper. It's about reforms in the justice system. Come in, Anthony, Turner said, opening his office door. I have some time now. As they sat down, Anthony took out a recorder. Is it okay if I record our conversation? For accuracy? That's fine, Turner nodded. So, Anthony began, his voice a mixture of nervousness and enthusiasm. Everyone knows the basics of what happened 6 months ago. How you were disrespected by a racist officer and made one phone call that changed everything. But what I really want to understand is what happened after. How did you turn one incident into actual systemic change? Turner smiled slightly at the oversimplification, but appreciated the young man's focus on the reforms rather than the incident itself.